Association. Here to talk to you a little bit about the guidance for weddings and other events, what folks need to know going forward, what we may expect to change here in the near future, and going through kind of the litany of the regulations that are involved in it. It's gonna be somewhat of a complicated issue, and so happy to answer any questions you guys have at the end. I'll try to go through this as quickly as I can, and then get to the question and answer period, which I think is probably the most beneficial. But we'll start off. Make sure I have control of this. Oh, see if I can go back here.
I think if you use the arrow keys on your keyboard.
Oh, there we go.
That should help.
There we go. Before we get started, some things that I always like to start off with. I'm not a lawyer or a doctor for these purposes of this conversation. So this is not legal advice, it's not medical advice. Please consult with your counsel for specific questions related to your business. This guidance is accurate as of when I redid this deck as of 3/16. Nothing has changed in the last 2 days. So we're good on that front. So this is all the way up to date. These regulations are changing pretty fast. So any updates that we have after this, I'll be sure to follow up with Candace about and share that information with you folks. Some questions we've asked the governor's office to still clarify for us. So we still have some outstanding questions that we're still awaiting answers on. Hope to have those soon. And when we get those answers, again, I'll share that information. So some of the questions you may have at the end here, I can't necessarily guarantee that I'll have the answers for you, but I will do my very best. As we move here. So this new guidance, or the guidance for events, is located in Phase 3 of the Food Service Detailed Guidance, Section D for in-person and catered events, pages 7 through 10. This is effective March 15th, so going back 3 days ago. Events following this guidance cannot take place from midnight to 5 a.m. You may have seen that the curfew was lifted for some industries yesterday. The restaurant and catering industry was not one of them. It was gyms, movie theaters, billiard halls, bowling alleys, things like that had the curfew lifted. The curfew still remains in effect for the restaurant industry at 11 p.m. and then for catered events and other things like that, it's midnight. This sets the social gathering limit at 50 people. Again, this is sort of important, from March 15th to March 22nd, and then increases that on March 22nd, so next Monday, to 100 people indoors and 200 people outdoors. So what that means is if you're having an event this weekend, and the guidance we're going to get to here in a couple seconds, you do have to follow it for those events between 50 and 150 people. If you're looking to have events after next Monday, you don't need to follow this guide. You only need to follow this guidance for events over 100, between 100 and 150 for indoors, and then between 200 and 500 outdoors. So if you have an event outdoors coming up under 200 people, you don't necessarily need to follow all of the guidance that I'm going to get to here. This guidance only applies to non-residential events. And it includes, but is not limited to, wedding receptions, celebrations, similar private venue events such as meetings and conferences. So occupancy is limited to the lesser of 75% outside of New York City, which is what we're talking about today, for a particular area as set by your certificate of occupancy, or 150 people. This 150 person number does not include employees and event staff. That's separate, but 75% of your space, or 150 people, whatever is lower. Establishments may have more than one event on premise at the same time, as long as these events are in separate and distinguishable areas. Again, it must be held in different areas on the premises. Cannot share the same spaces or rooms. Cannot use the same entrances and exits at the same time. It's important to note, if you have 2 events going on at your property at the same time in 2 different rooms, what you can do is, as long as you stagger, the start times of both and the end times of both, that's perfectly okay. Attendees from separate events cannot engage in in-person interaction with each other. They don't want people going back and forth to these other events. And the bathroom capacity must be limited to avoid congregation segregation, face masks must be worn, and social distancing must be observed. For the purposes of this conversation, social distancing is going to mean 6 feet. That's what the CDC has said, and that's what the state is following. There has been some talk about how in schools the CDC has moved to 3 feet being okay, but for the purposes of this conversation and as things stand right now, social distancing is going to be 6 feet. Concurrent events on the same premises that share attendees or a common purpose are prohibited. So again, just not sharing people back and forth. What isn't prohibited is you can have staff go and float between two events that are happening on your property at the same time. That's fine. They just don't want attendees going back and forth at the same time. Again, restaurant dining service that serves patrons in parties that not associated with the event may continue service. So if you have a restaurant area and let's say you have a back room for banquets and stuff like that, both of those rooms can be have people in them. The restaurant would have to follow the 75% rule for capacity starting Monday. The event space would have to follow the 75% capacity rule or lower, whatever that was lower of that in 150. But they can both be active at the same time. Again, as long as you just don't have like, customers going back to the banquet room or the banquet room customers going out to the restaurant for any long periods of time. That is still prohibited. Occupancy numbers for non-residential events will be less in cluster zones. I don't believe there are any cluster zones out in Chemung, but there are 5 yellow zones that still exist, 4 of which are in New York City, 1 of which is in Orange County or something like that. Those are all being lifted on Monday, so I don't think we need to talk too much about that. This is important. As of 2/24, the caterer or operator must notify their county health department if they plan to host in-person or catered events above 50 people. Again, that 50-person number is from March 15th to March 22nd, or on March 22nd, that number increases to 100 people indoors or 200 people outdoors. The notice to the local health department must be submitted at least 5 days in advance of the event. We've asked the question that if events come up with like, for example, like a funeral or something like that, like a funeral lunch or something like that, where you necessarily don't have 5 days, what the protocol for that is. We're awaiting the guidance from the governor's office about that. But again, you want to submit this, your plan at least 5 days in advance of the event. I don't know if actually the Chemung Health Department has a form to fill out. If not, Erie County has one. I can certainly share that with folks after the call today. And we've been telling folks to use that as a template for the information that you submit to your local health department. I will endeavor to find out if Chemung has one, and if not, I will send you folks the Erie County one, and you can use that as a template for now. As we move forward here. This is what needs to be included in some of this stuff. Submitted details must include, but are not limited to, operator contact info, event name or function, event address, time and date, event duration, expected number of attendees, expected number of event staff, and location on the premises indicated by a description and/or event floor plan. All that stuff there is pretty self-explanatory. Check with your local health department for an online form. If you don't have one, I will shoot you again that template over where you can base this information off of. And events may be subject to inspection by local health authorities to ensure compliance. Just be aware that, just like anything else, if you guys are operating an event, the local health department can come in and make sure you're doing things the right way. Contact tracing information. For events conducted within this guidance, so again, over the social gathering limit, which again, for our purposes of this conversation, is over 50 for the upcoming week, and then over 100 starting Monday to 150. Each attendee is required to provide the following contact tracing data before or immediately upon arrival: their name, date of birth, address, email, and phone number. If the attendee is a minor, an adult from their party, household, family can provide this information. For whatever reason you're having a Sweet 16 party or something like that, the parents can provide this information. If for whatever reason the child did not want to, or could not want, or couldn't for whatever reason. This information can be obtained digitally or on paper. You can keep just a sheet in front of you of all this information. If you wanted to have it sent to you ahead of time, as long as you kept it on like an Excel spreadsheet or something like that, that would be more to suffice. You have to maintain this contact tracing data for 28 days, so a month. And then if the state or local health authorities ask you for it, you have to be able to provide that contact tracing information. Operator and caterer must require and ensure all attendees have received a negative diagnostic test result for COVID-19. Now, this is the sort of the onerous part about this. Must use an FDA authorized PCR test or nucleic acid amplification test collected within 72 hours of the event's start time, or a rapid test collected within 6 hours of the event on premise, provided rapid test meets all requirements as set forth by the DOH. Alternatively, attendees may provide proof of having completed the COVID-19 vaccination series as long as they've got that vaccination 14 days in advance. That may change as we start to move forward here. The Department of Health is still sort of monitoring how long it takes folks who have been vaccinated, how long that for the vaccine to sort of kick in. Any attendee who fails to provide a negative diagnostic test or proof of immunization as described must be denied entry to the event. We are aware this is sort of onerous on the event spaces and you folks who are holding the events, and so we're trying to get this changed. We're trying to get it altered in a way. However, this is the way they want to start to do things at the moment. Hopeful that may change going forward here, but at least that's where things are right now. Screening for testing for staff. So employees and event staff must be tested for COVID through diagnostic tests prior to the events, and then must test bi-weekly thereafter if they are actively engaged in hosting events and interacting in close contact with the attendees. So your staff that needs to be tested are the ones who are sort of working the event on the floor, so to speak. The back of the house workers do not need to be tested bi-weekly if they have no interaction with the customers who are attending the event. Employees may alternatively provide proof of having completed the vaccine at least 14 days prior to the event. Again, if you've had your staff vaccinated or they've been able to obtain a vaccine, they do not need to be tested following that. That would suffice. Operator and caterer must implement mandatory health screening for employees, event staff, and attendees prior to the event. What this means is just these series of questions regarding current or recent COVID-19 symptoms. Have they had close or proximate contact with confirmed or suspected COVID-19 cases? Have they tested positive for COVID-19 recently? And compliance with the state's travel advisory, although that question, we're working with the governor's office to ensure that question still needs to be asked. All the mandatory quarantine periods for traveling in between states has ceased. So as long as they haven't traveled if they've traveled to another state in this country, they no longer need to quarantine. I don't know actually right now if there's still quarantine mandates for those for traveling internationally. So that might still be a thing you need to ask for, but at least for domestic travel, there are no longer regulations mandating self-isolation and quarantine there. Operator caterer must ensure social distancing by maintaining at least 6 feet from other individuals, except members of the same party, household, or family. Attendees must be assigned to a table or area where they must be seated while eating and drinking and remain for the duration of the event. Again, to the extent practicable, attendees should be seated at a table or area with members of their immediate family or household, understanding that that's not always going to be able to be accomplished. Where attendees may frequently interact with staff, appropriate physical barriers should be installed. Appropriate signage must be posted notifying attendees of social distancing requirements. And attendees, staff, and employees over the age of 2 are required to wear acceptable face coverings at all times, except when they're seated at the assigned table. They can certainly take their mask off to eat and drink, or when presenting or speaking at an event, provided that attendees maintain 12 feet of social distance from other attendees or separated by an appropriate physical barrier. So if you have folks getting up to give a best man toast or something along those lines, just make sure they're sort of off on their own. If that's the case, then they do not have to wear a mask. Again, just operator and caterers must post signage notifying attendees of face covering requirements at the event locations. Just make sure you have signs that say, masks are to be worn at all times while moving around. Caterers and operators must ensure that all event attendees are confirmed in advance via guest list to ensure compliance with occupancy, planned movements of guests, and to prevent unnecessary congregation or congestion in common areas. Again, just points of ingress and egress must be designated, and you need to have a sort of a system to stagger ingress and egress should be developed. They don't want everybody coming in coming in at the same time through the same doors or leaving at the same time through the same doors. So some sort of staggered entrance and exits strategy would be preferred. Um, limit. They want you to limit amenities. So your coat checks, your valets, unless protective measures can be adapted where those folks are concerned. And again, when you're having folks move around, directional paths should be adopted while you're on floors and stairs. So if you have like one stairwell for people to go up, one stairwell for people to go down, or one side of each of the stairwells, that would suffice. Or if, again, a lot of this isn't practicable, but they want to do it. They want you to see you do it if you can. Caterers and operators must ensure that attendees are not congregating except when seated at their tables. Again, attendees should only be standing when necessary to go get food or when necessary to the event. So standing cocktail receptions are permitted, but they need to be adherence to the strict social distancing guidelines, and face coverings can only be removed for eating and drinking when seated. So it's not you're going to be your typical cocktail hour sort of thing. It's going to be like people can get up and mingle and speak to one another while wearing the face coverings, but cannot remove their face coverings to eat or drink until they are seated at a table. This also includes sort of your cocktail table type things where you might have people stand around or things like that. They want people to physically be seated. And again, masks may not be removed for eating and drinking if other attendees of family or household or party are within 6 feet. Again, they really want folks to be seated at a table that is their designated area to take their masks off to eat and drink. Live music, DJs, entertainment, and dancing are all allowed within the following parameters. Unmasked performers or entertainers must be separated by attendees by at least 12 feet or by an appropriate barrier. So if you have a DJ or a band, just make sure they're far enough away from the rest of the guests. Select attendees designated prior to the event may participate in ceremonial dances with members of the immediate party, family, or household. If separated from 6 feet from other attendees, your bride and groom dance, mother-son dance, father-daughter dance, things of that nature. And attendees can also dance, but there are some rules here that we're actively trying to get changed, and I can actually mention that after I get through this little spiel. But dancing is allowed among attendees, amongst members of the party, family, or household seat if they're seated at the same table within clearly marked areas or zones that are assigned. These zones should be at least 6 feet apart from other attendees. Anybody who's dancing must be masked, and these attendees must not enter other designated dance zones. One of the things that we've asked the governor's office for, and to make this change, because we've heard from caterers that this is pretty onerous, and we understand that, is that all dancing be allowed as long as masks are worn at all times, and that folks can move within these zones, quote unquote, as long as they're wearing masks. Then would that suffice? Because again, we're going through all these testing measures, so people shouldn't be getting into the event even if they have any form of the virus whatsoever. So we think that this is a little bit much, and that if we just require masks to be worn while dancing, that would meet that requirement, and that would make things perfectly safe. So we are sending out a letter to the governor's office asking them for that to be changed. We're also doing a phone to action campaign through the Restaurant Association, encouraging our folks to get in touch with their local legislators and say, look, we need this to be changed, because again, we've heard from caterers around the state that this is particularly troublesome, and they've had folks cancel weddings because of their unwillingness to, I shouldn't say unwillingness, but their frustration with this rule, let's say that. Caterers and operators should consider staggered intervals for food service at staff buffets to maintain social distancing, and caterers operators should consider serving any past food in containers that limit touching of shared surfaces. Think of your past hors d'oeuvre, stuff like that. Something that can be single serve would be preferable. And that is it in a nutshell. I ran through an awful lot of information pretty quick there. I know folks probably have questions. I am more than happy to answer them. I think we have one in the chat at the moment. Beth, if our venue space is rented for a gathering, would we be responsible for obtaining the contact tracing information, or would it be the event organizer? Beth, it would be the event organizer. If folks are reaching out, if they're in charge of the event, they're in charge of getting the information. If it's just simply your venue and that's it, they're responsible for what goes on in there. So that would fall to them.
Kevin?
Yes.
So I'm not going, I'm going to write it in.
Okay. Katie, I think Candace said at the beginning that this slideshow will be shared. It certainly can be on our end. We have no happy to if it not, I can certainly send it to you afterwards.
Yeah, I can I'll send the recording and the presentation itself along to everyone afterwards. And then also, Kevin, that template that you mentioned, we can look and see if that's something that we already have, but if you have that you can share, that would be great. And I can facilitate that with everyone.
Yeah, that's not a problem, actually.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That'll be very helpful.
Okay, it's a few questions in here now. Alan, good to see you on this. How about if you had a catering event at another venue? Again, I should have actually maybe touched on this when I was getting to Beth's question. It's going to be a little bit of in terms of like who's signing on for some of the liability purposes in that contract, like who's going to be responsible for some of this stuff. If you're a catering event at another venue, sort of if you're just the caterer and you're simply just like sort of dropping off the food, I would say that no, this responsibility doesn't fall on you. But if you're more in tune with the event and depending on how the breakdown goes, then you both may be required or it may fall upon you. It's going to depend a lot on the contract and sort of the liability there. From what we've gathered from the governor's office is, they're going to want somebody to do it. It's just a matter of who's willing to do it and who that responsibility may fall to. Obviously, if you're a one-stop shop and you're kind of doing everything at once, you would be responsible for it. If it's something as simply as you're bringing the food to another event and there's an event staff there that's taking care of it, then they're going to be responsible for it. Again, if the folks who are staffing the event, that plays a large role into it. They're getting their employees tested and things like that. It would be up to them. So it's going to depend a little bit on each unique circumstances. Julie, the staff doesn't need to be vaccinated to be in contact with the guests. They just need to test negative for the virus to interact with the guests. Can an employer be required for staff to be vaccinated? I'm glad you mentioned knowing you're not a lawyer because this is where that really comes into play. Yes, there are ways for you to mandate that your staff be vaccinated, but what I will say is that is very complicated, and you certainly want to consult a lawyer before getting down that path. I'm sort of hesitant to even talk about that too much just because I don't want to lead people astray. You can do that. I know you can mandate your staff get vaccinated when they can. However, there are very specific hurdles you have to go through to ensure that you're doing it correctly. And I would very much encourage you to reach out to your legal counsel about that.
Kevin, it's Kamala Keeley here with the Chamber. I just wanted to chime on that topic. I actually spoke with an attorney earlier this week, and it's highly recommended against mandating your employees to receive the vaccine, like Kevin said. But you are encouraged to incentivize them if you want to, or to find other ways to encourage them. And just as a follow-up, the Chamber is having a seminar on March 23rd with attorney Michael Sciatti, and he is going to be going over these exact kind of like rules and regulations and concepts that are at play right now, including, the 4 hours of time off so that your employees can get vaccinated, how it ties into paid sick leave, whether or not you can, should or could mandate employees to be vaccinated, et cetera. So I would encourage everybody on this call to hop on that seminar on the 23rd, and you can register through the Chamber. Sorry to take up some time there, Kevin, but I just figured I'd throw that out there while the topic came up.
Oh no, absolutely. Yeah, go. I would recommend going and taking part in that if you certainly can, because again, I've sat through some of those myself. There are a lot of specifics, as was just framed. I don't recommend it at all. It's very complicated and it can present certain legal issues down the road, but it can be done. But again, incentivizing it's the easiest way that we found to go do it.
I can share that link with everyone too in the follow-up to register for that webinar as well.
Oh, that's fantastic. I might join that webinar if it's not too much trouble as well, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. You're more than welcome.
Always interested in hearing that sort of stuff. Employers are responsible for paying for employees screening. Um, there's some sort of question around that. I mean, there are free testing places available, but again, if they're getting tested for an event, then they do have to end up paying for, as your employer, and you're mandating them to go do that. The employers would be responsible for paying for employee screening. Although again, there are free testing sites available, so I would encourage folks to sort of use those, and guide their employees to those if they can. Those can be found on the New York Forward website, I believe. They have a list of free testing sites. We're getting a little bit out of my depth here. Do these rules apply to festivals as well? We're planning an outdoor festival with food trucks and art and music demonstrations. Do we fall into this category? You fall into a different category, I believe. Again, if it's at a venue, like a catering venue, then I would say that you would fall under these rules sort of thing. But again, I can understand where that's a little hazy. If it's an outdoor festival with food trucks, I would say that as long as you have under 200 people where things stand now, you don't have to do this. But again, I don't know if festivals have their own special rule. I am not sort of up to date on that. There's another sort of area that was released with guidance that came to sort of larger outdoor music festivals and things like that, or music venues, I should say. They have different rules, so you may fall into that category. It's sort of going to depend on where you're having it. So I don't exactly know there, and don't really want to give you wrong info. But I can look into that for you. Again, the food trucks in art and music demonstrations, they don't come into play too much as long as folks are keeping social distance in line and staying far enough away from the demonstrations. I think that would be the more than suffice. But again, in terms of number of attendees you can have, I'm not entirely sure. It also is going to depend. And one thing I probably should have said earlier, and maybe I did, but if I haven't, I'll say that now, is look, these rules are changing really quickly and very frequently at this point. As we see these, vaccination numbers go up and things start moving in this direction, these numbers are changing fast. As you can see, like the numbers from March 15th, Monday to next Monday, have already changed with the social gathering limits involved. So I wouldn't be shocked if these rules look completely different in less than a month. We could be seeing like these numbers look very, very different by that point. So I just want to say, like, if you're having this festival sometime, with more than a month from now, I would say, like, look, these are going to be a lot different by that point, and you're going to be looking almost at a whole new world, so to speak.
Kevin, my apologies. Kim Keeley again. I hopped on a little
Yeah.
late. I had another meeting, but did you cover the Excelsior Pass with the group at all?
No, I haven't touched on the Excelsior Pass. You can, if you would like to, by all means, go for it.
Well, I don't think it's actually. I think they've launched it in testing at this point for certain events in New York State. So it's coming out shortly. We have received some additional guidance on it. The Excelsior Pass is going to be a smartphone app that individuals and correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, Kevin, because it's all, as you said, evolving quickly, but it'd be for individuals and, event producers or employers to use to verify whether someone has A, been vaccinated, or B, tested negative. So that is going to be a smartphone app that's in process of being launched in New York State, so that businesses can use that, and individuals would, it's like, let's say you're going to an event or festival and there are guidelines for you need to either, show a negative test result or be vaccinated. You would then use this app. As an event producer, you would use it to screen people coming in, and then individuals would use it to kind of like have the apps talk to each other and get the clearance to enter. So, I mean, and there's all kinds of legal issues with this as well that are kind of going through the legal circles. But I did want to make sure that everybody was aware that's coming through. The chamber will be posting that information as it becomes more readily available in our weekly updates to members. So Candace, who sent all the notices for this meeting, she sends those out weekly. If you want to get on that list to get that information, let Candace know. But that's something that is coming, and I just wanted everybody to be aware that that's in the pipeline.
No, that's good. That's good to know, and that's important information, and I appreciate you sharing that. Again, I will say it's just in the testing sort of period right now, and that we don't have anything for sure on that, but it will make lives of the caterers easier, and you folks who are having events, just because, again, you can just use it to you can just use it to kind of scan a phone and go through that way, instead of having to necessarily ask information and stuff like that, and
And it
heading
would
out
be
to.
a universal platform that businesses in New York State could be using, or events in New York
Yep.
State could be using. But like I said, and as Kevin said, it's in testing. There's a lot of issues. They have been testing it out, but we do expect that to drop in the near future.
Yep. Landon, rapid test on site, a thing that may be available to businesses in the future. Yes, I think that is something that they're looking to make available to businesses in the future. I know there's some private companies that are doing it now, that if you wanted to partner with one of them, you could have, you could contract with them to come in and do rapid testing on site for events and things like that. I don't know the cost associated with that right now. I know some of the larger caterers down in Long Island, I think, are looking into something like that, but I don't know what enough details on that to let you know exactly what the price point is on that. But the state is looking to do that on their own as well, is to sort of provide rapid testing in sort of areas where folks are, where there are a lot of events where they could go and get rapid tested the day of event. I have also including the Erie County DOH Department of Health template that they're using for the events that are taking place in Erie County. I haven't been able to check and see if Chemung has one yet. If they don't, what I would say is use this as a template for the information to provide, and then just sort of provide that information when you send in your notice to the Department of Health. I know some counties have put stuff up, some counties haven't yet. It's really hit or miss around the state. So, but if they haven't, used this would be more than sufficient for the information that you need to provide for your notification purposes. Did I miss any questions here? I think I got to them. Does anybody else have any other questions? If what I'll do here too is that if anybody needs to get in touch with me, I'm going to throw my email here in the chat box. If they have any questions or something occurs to them after this call or what have you, happy to for you to reach out. Happy to answer any questions that I can. And I know this stuff can be very complicated and it can be very confusing. So happy to do what I can to make sure you guys are doing it correctly and not suffer some of the fines that are associated with these violations.
I did just, while we don't have any more questions right now, I did just want to take a minute to stress that, with the costs for having an event and having, testing required, whether you're an event space that's hosting a wedding or you're putting on your own event, build the cost of that required testing or regulations into either the price per person, if it's a wedding event, or into the ticket cost for the event for people to attend. Like, nonprofit organizations or businesses should not be absorbing that cost of having to test their employees for events or having to, have, proof of that with attendees and things like that. So make sure, when you look at these regulations and the costs associated with them, make sure you don't bear the brunt of that internally. Find ways to kind of spread that out over the cost of the event so that you're not taking that hit.
Yeah, that's well said.
Yeah, we can put the link in for that webinar. Hang on.
Yeah, again, I will include that in the follow-up email that has the link for the recording today, and all of the other information I'll include in the follow-up email as well.
I think that's it too, if you want to get it from there.
Candace, feel free to, if anybody has questions, you can provide my contact information in that email.
Perfect. Thank you.
If you wanted to circulate that, that's a-okay.
Thank you.
That's all I have, guys. I don't know if anybody else has anything else. Feel free to ask. If not, again, feel free to reach out to me. I'll get back to you as soon as I can.
Kevin, thanks a bunch. You're a great ally to the chamber, and we appreciate all the support you give us and keeping us up to date on these things. It is fast and furious for sure. And we appreciate our partnership with you guys very much.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. And again, I'll keep you guys up to date as best I can as things move here.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Kevin, and the New York State Restaurant Association for putting this on for us today. And I will just mention, if there's anyone on who is not a chamber member and you are interested in membership, you can reach out to us at info@chemungchamber.org or give us a call at 607-734-5137, and we'd be happy to chat with you about that. Thank you and have a good day.